Hello and welcome back to the Go Karts and Good Times YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be doing something very special, probably the most exciting mod to the Miata yet, and that will be turbocharging it. If you're new to the channel or haven't been keeping up with this specific project, this is my 1990 Mazda Miata, which I bought for an insane deal because it had the driver's side floor pan rusted out and the frame rail completely gone, which I had to reconstruct in a previous video. Also in previous videos, I've got the battery mounted in a secure location. I fixed some leaky brake lines, got a radiator installed, got the fans working, and the car runs, drives, starts, and stops, and now it's ready for an upgrade to the stock power plant. When I first started the project, getting a manual swapped was a much bigger priority than getting it boosted, but I was at the junkyard one day and noticed an Isuzu truck with this turbo. It's a Garrett GT 2560, an actual Garrett, and these are pretty common turbos that people have said work pretty good on the Miatas. It's a little bit big for the power I'm making and with the lack of supporting mods, but running it at low boost should be alright for the car, especially considering that I have 30 days to return the thing and I leave for college in a few days, so I want to make sure the turbo's alright before I end up throwing away my chance to return it. I'm finally back to working on the Miata, and I just got the video that you're watching right now edited, and I'm going to throw this clip on pretty early on to get things explained. I didn't actually end up getting as much as I wanted to achieve as far as getting the turbo setup figured out, but that's alright because rushing things never leads to a good end, and I started and got some progress done anyway, so I'm still happy that I went ahead and did the work despite not getting it done. And some of the things, as you'll see, are kind of temporary, so there will be some changes to the final form of it, obviously, because I'm kind of just using what I have and trying to do it not maybe as cheap as possible, but very inexpensively. So hopefully you'll still watch the video anyway, because I do make some good progress and get more done on the Miata, and always I'm just trying to forward the build by making progress. In the last video, I got the factory manifold out, and here it sits, which is what I will be using to fabricate up a turbo manifold. What I'll be doing is chopping the runners and flipping it upside down so that the exhaust points forwards and upwards in the car, and I'll have to lob off the stock flange for my own so that I can get everything bolted up. The other day at the store, I picked up a boost gauge, and I ordered a sandwich plate a few days ago that finally came so that I can start to get the necessary lines run to the turbo to get it spinning without overheating or damaging the bearings. As you can see here, with no interior air conditioning or heat, I don't need any lines running inside the car, so I have the heater core looped, and I'll probably use that to supply coolant to the turbo, and using the sandwich plate, and then eventually getting a bung welded or a hole drilled in the oil pan, I can get oil supplied and returned. The most annoying thing is that this turbo uses a bunch of banjo fittings, so I'll have to get these hard lines adapted to some other size that I can use, either brake lines or copper lines or something somewhat standard, so that I can have reliable high pressure hard line that goes from the oil supply to the turbo. In any case, that's enough talking. It's now time to get these runners chopped and get this manifold flipped upside down and welded so that it can be adapted into a turbo manifold. Just like that, the first part of my turbo manifold is done. It flips upside down, all the runners are welded back together, and now it's ready for me to lob off the end and put on a flange. Except I don't have thick enough material to make a flange out of, so I'm going to have to go get some of that, then trace an outline of the turbo, get it cut out, and then mount it up. As you can see, I have a bucket of parts here, and that's because while I go get material to make a flange, I also want to find fittings to get the turbo plumbed up. I need oil feed, drain, coolant feed, and drain. The coolant's easier than the oil, but Either way, I still have to get the correct fittings so that I can get attached to this PCV hose, which is rated high enough pressure for an oil feed, but I have no way of getting things attached or making these banjo fittings work. So I'm going to stop into a few stores and see if I can piece something together. As you can see, I now have a pile of different fittings to get this thing working. Both of my coolant lines are taken care of. I just have to clean up the ends of these, flare them, and then put them into these fittings, which are a little bit big and heavy, but guess what? There's not many other ways to get thread on the end of a random cut-off banjo line unless you want to weld onto it. And one, that's not a great option. Two, I don't have the threaded pieces I need anyway in steel, so these will work just fine, and they get it adapted to the same size line as the heater core would have used, which is already looped, so I can just get my coolant off of that. It will not be the coolest coolant in the system, but it'll be better than nothing, and it'll work just fine for now. As far as getting an oil line figured out, I have the return. It should work fine with this nice big fitting I found that is steel. It almost threads in, but a weld around this, then I'll have a nice threaded end on the return, so basically any size I need I can get. But the problem is, on the sandwich plate I got, these 1/8 size plumbing fittings are a little bit uncommon, especially when I'll be stepping it up to this size line for the feed, which is a little bit big, but it's what I have, so I'm making do with it. And I don't want a chain of connectors this long to get it bumped up to the correct size, so I may end up drilling this out and re-tapping it, but I'm not sure if I actually have the tap to do that. So getting an oil feed figured out will be something I deal with later. I didn't end up finding a piece of metal that worked correctly for me. I do have some decently thick things, and I do have the stock Miata flanges, which I could make the two triangles into a rectangle, but I don't want to do this. I have one more lead as far as metal goes, which I'm going to check out before I start working on getting those lines flared and starting to install things in the car, or at least prepare for getting the turbo on. Either way, I'm going to get to work checking those things out and getting these lines flared and terminated with my new fittings. I'm starting things off easy by doing what I can with the lines, and if the camera will focus, you can see that I've got the oil drain welded up with that fitting so that I can now thread in the correct size nipple and get that drain. I thought I was going to be able to get the pan done today, or at least drop it off, but as it turns out, you have to either drop the suspension, the subframe, or lift the engine out of the car to actually get the oil pan off. So I might dig a little deeper, or I might just not worry about it. The plumbing for the turbo is now done, with all of these banjo lines terminated and fittings that I can actually use. So the next order of business is actually getting to that large piece of metal I have and trying to make it into a flange. I have all the plumbing that I can do for now, besides actually getting that sandwich plate in for the oil feed, so I think it's time to start doing some fabricating so I can get the turbo bolted up. Even if I don't get it started, this is a very time-consuming part of the process, and I need to do it eventually, especially the rough cut and getting it down to the size of the turbo, which is rectangular out of a circle. So I'll start working on that and come back with another update when I get it. Unfortunately, it appears I probably won't be able to get the turbo swap done, or maybe even the turbo on the engine to hear it run before I leave, but that's alright. I'll have something to look forward to when I get back, and I really don't want to rush the process. I started out earlier this week trying to get as much done as soon as possible, but doing things that way, you lead to mistakes, and doing things half-assed, you'll have to come back and fix anyway. This isn't that important to me, well, I'd want to see it, so I may or may not start cutting the flange out, and I might get the manifold done, but we'll just have to see how things play out when I come back to conclude this video. And obviously there'll be more videos on getting the turbo swap process done, but for now, I think this is where I might leave things, and I'll come back if I have an update or if I close out the video. I'm not sure exactly what I said or where everything lies, but I think this is where this video is going to end. For the most part, I got all the lines done, or at least the ones that I can manage. I still have to get that bung in the oil pan welded on, which is cheap and shouldn't be a huge issue when I go to get that resolved sometime later in the future. Dropping the K-frame or pulling the engine up a little bit isn't a huge deal if I have some help and have more time on my hands. In the feed, I could have gotten some fittings to get it adapted, but I have an idea for getting that later. Otherwise, coolant lines are done. The manifold is chopped and flipped upside down, which is a step that I've needed to take for a while, and I have most of the things I need to get the turbo plumbed. I even have a boost gauge and a couple little other odds and ends that I'll need later in the future. Realistically, I'm out of time to work on this thing, so I think I'm going to throw the manifold back on, upside down, and get the car moved back into the other garage and start to get things cleaned up. This is a little bit sad, but it's totally necessary, and I need the time to get things prepared before I go off in a couple days, so this is just where it'll have to lie. Hopefully you're excited about the fact that I am actually turboing the car and of the modifications I've been doing in the past week that are detailed in other videos, getting the car more finished and ready to actually be driven. I know it still doesn't look like much, but at least now the car can run for as long as I want it to. It can start, it can stop, it can do everything that I've realistically needed to do for now. Which means things like a turbo aren't as essential or important, especially considering I'm spending very, very little on the setup that I plan to be using. So for the time being, this is fine, and I'm going to get things buttoned up. And that means that I will be ending things here. Hopefully you did enjoy, and if you did, I'd appreciate it if you leave a comment, if you liked the video, and if you even consider subscribing to the channel to see my other projects and to see future content on the Miata and the other projects. For now, this is me signing off, and hopefully you guys stay safe, stay happy, do what you love, and make the most of your time while I am off YouTube, essentially for a couple months probably. So, goodbye.